Mr. Grinch, you really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus, you're as charming as an eel, Mr. Grinch.
Now when I say ho, 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 you know who I'm talking to. Santa baby, ain't nobody jocking you. Put my name on the naughtiest list. I'm a potty mouth, and I party like this. I piss my name in the snow. I cuss and I'm always hustling, earning my coal. Plus I'm grinchy as hell, stingy and greedy, sleazy and seedy as well. All my favorite things, heart the herald, double barrel sing. And the carolers quit, I'm arrogant, I don't care, I'm the shit. My will is ill, I do confess that it's true, I do my best to ruin your cheer. I'm doing it every year.
You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch. You really are a heel. You're as cuddly as a cactus, you're as charming as an eel, Mr. Grinch.
Hello everyone, welcome in. I hope you're having a wonderful Thanksgiving. If I sound a little weird, I am on the tail end of some kind of crazy flu, I believe. I don't know if any of you guys have gotten sick, but it was a doozy. So if I sound a little off, that is why. But I still wanted to bring you a small holiday treat because the investigation into the leaked medical records never ends for us here. And I figured, what a better way to say Happy Thanksgiving to 10th Woman and the leaker. So we will start here where we have left off. I know that some of the videos along the way of this investigation are privated because they contain old information and they get little spikes of views. So I was worried about people getting old and bad information. So those are privated. But the video that is most recent, when we exposed the messages between 10th Woman and the leaker, we got a message like the one here on screen where 10th Woman is in the bluish purple and the leaker is in the grayish white. Also, just to reconfirm, here is the name Renee from the unredacted medical records, as well as the print date and time. Of course, as many of you know, every time I have done another round of this investigation, so to speak, I get more and more information. 10th Woman is not able to provide anything to disprove my claims, but she does try every time, which makes you question, why is the simple theory that these were court-ordered medical records so intimidating to her and the leaker? We will answer that by the end, but this is just a small snippet of things she has only released because of my pressing. We're going to take a quick look at this one just to review. Remember, after I obtained the messages between 10th Woman and the leaker, she put out 2 new documents. One was this document, which is an email to Alexee from Artesia General Hospital. Interesting, right? In this email, you'll notice a few interesting dates. The first date mentioned is the date of the audit, because the date prior, on July 11th, 2023, is when the medical records were officially leaked online by 10th Woman. So the next day, Artesia General does an internal audit to see how and why that could have happened. They say that there were indeed 2 times that the medical records were improperly accessed. The 2 dates are January 30th, 2023, which we have an explanation for, and June 22nd, 2023, which we do not have an explanation for. The one interesting fact about these dates is they do not add up with the print date of the medical records. Because remember, that print date is 4/13/23. That print date is not listed here. Moving on to the other document she released after I was able to obtain her messages with the leaker, she released this detective's note in which it says that Cindy Buck gave the medical records improperly to a detective. I'm assuming because the detectives were conducting business in regards to the investigation into Alexee and baby Alex's death on January 30th. You can confirm that with the body camera footage. That would be the date in which the improper access here is referenced January 30th, 2023, and it was given to the detective by Cindy Buck by simply filling out a medical request form, which we know is improper because you do indeed need a court order. So with that being said, this is just a quick kind of frame of how these documents could have moved. These aren't printed on a random date, and they do not add up with any of the dates of the improper private health information accesses, meaning they were only given to very select people. Also meaning finding out who this leaker is going to be extremely easy for the state. Now, what I have come to realize is I have been hesitant to bring forth all of the information I have from this investigation to anyone because I do not want to insert myself into the Alexee Trevizo case as it is. I don't want to impact anything, and I'm sure that the investigation is going on just fine on its own. What I have come to realize is I do believe I may have stumbled upon proof of a crime. So with that being said, I am looking into how we get this to the proper officials and we don't impact the Alexee case. So obviously, if we go down the pink side, if everything was proper and these were printed by Renee, given to the detectives properly, no one made copies or anything like that, they got entered as evidence, sent to the defense after discovery, somehow were given to 10th Woman and then posted online. That doesn't necessarily mean anyone in Team Trevizo had to intentionally try to leak these records. You can honestly say, what if, a distraught Rosa was just telling her friends and got betrayed, sharing information about her daughter's case? I'm beginning to believe that's actually completely not what happened at all. I'm almost fairly certain we can clear the Trevizos at this time. We can clear Gary Mitchell. Here's what I actually think happened, which is down the purple side. An extra copy was made, which is a crime. This person held on to this copy for some reason until this case goes viral for over a month. It was then given to 10th Woman and posted online. Now, I put these with the little squiggly lines because I cannot be certain when and how the email from Alexee went to 10th Woman, if all this information was given to 10th Woman right off the bat, or if the leaker is slowly giving 10th Woman information as I've been pushing them to help try and corroborate their story. I'm not sure, but that's why I don't have a solid time frame as to when that happened, because it could have happened at any point throughout their conversations. So if we go back here, we will see there's the dates, January 30th. We have explained that was the police getting the first copy of the medical records improperly. June 22nd, that's when the case is going viral. Now, that could possibly be when the leaker accessed these medical records, but I find that unlikely because from the research I've done, do not see that hospitals will store physical paper copies of printed medical records even once they have given them over for court order or by subpoena or anything like that. It actually seems that would be considered improper. So who and why accessed this information on the 22nd still seems to be a mystery. So one thing that always was weird to me was that they had the wrong address for the 10th Woman on the defense witness list. I was not sure if it was just chalked up to haste, if a lot of information comes up for her in Florida, so they assumed it was Florida and they just threw it out there, or what. But she also had this comment that made me feel suspicious as well when she said, if I ever get called to the stand, because, it would be very convenient if it had been Team Trevizo leaking this for some reason, that they put her on there, but say they could never find her and she never goes on the stand, right? Again, if Team Trevizo did do this, it would be very short-sighted, and I really am leaning to the idea that they didn't, because first you got to think Rosa and the family are paying anywhere between $100,000 to $150,000 for Gary Mitchell's representation. If this were to come out that this happened, they would lose him as their representation. Not many other people take cases like this. She would, Alexee would be without counsel, so to speak. She'd have to go with the public defender probably, unless someone else would have been willing to represent her. But with the publicity of the case, I don't know how many attorneys would want to do that, right? It's not great publicity. And unless your goal is to be like a Gary Mitchell, I don't think you want your name to be made off the Alexee Trevizo case. Let's just say that right now, because it's a losing case, right? It's not going to put you on the map as a defense attorney. So I had been doing some digging because people were asking for transcripts of Gary Mitchell's court prior trials, right? And so I am waiting to get some of those. But I did find this, if you'll notice the highlighted screenshot here at the bottom. This is from an about 10-year-old court filing in which Gary talks about his private investigator and how he hires private investigators to find people, right? So if they did want to find 10th Woman, I do believe they would be able to. And I am starting to lean, like I said, towards this being a rogue independent freak from Artesia General Hospital. So let's just keep that in mind. We're going to move now to a video that 10th Woman did when she first was put on the witness list. This is one of her first responses, right? And there's a few very, very interesting things that she says in here that when I was going back and listening to it, I said, oh my goodness, Freudian slip. So let's check these out.
Now understand that my name being on this witness list has everything to do with how I obtained the medical records. 100%. That's what they need to know, just as everybody wants to know. And I know people are kind of sitting here saying, oh, well, I can't wait to see how that information is getting out there. It's not. I hate to bust everybody's bubble, but that information is not getting out there. And believe that if I was to reveal my source, it probably would be a dagger in the prosecution case, big time. It would 100% help Gary Mitchell. But what my source and myself had to do in order to get this information is a reason why it's never going to come out. Might very well could show up on the prosecution's list next. Because if for whatever reason, the defense can't get the information, decides that they don't need it or whatever the case may be, the prosecution may. So again, that's why that's there. So another thing this other TikToker brought up was that the medical staff wouldn't risk their jobs to violate HIPAA. Understand something. She's right that they wouldn't, but let's just logically think about this. Why would they even have access to do that? CNA, RN, the nurse, the doctor, none of them go back and have access to medical files to print the entire file. They don't, and if they do have access to that, there's no purpose for that, if that makes any sense. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. And none of those people have medical licenses that can be yanked or pulled or any of that stuff. Are they still in violation of HIPAA? They absolutely would be, because they are still required to follow HIPAA. Now, they possibly could face some legal charges, but again, in order to do that, their tracking system is going to have to try to prove that the person who accessed the records is actually the person who made the copies, that the person who accessed the records is actually the person who made the copies, that the person who accessed the records is actually the person who made the copies or printed it, or that the name on there matches the person. And that's all a whole other big thing I'm not going to get into. If you know, you know. And the only thing that I have to do right now is make sure that I'm legally protected, my source is legally protected. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it.
Okay, so I brought us right back here real quick so we can discuss this part of it. She says they're not the ones who would have to, and then she says they're not the ones who had to give it to the police. Very, very interesting. Freudian slip? I think so, especially when you add it with the second one.
Possibly could face some legal charges, but again, in order to do that, their tracking system is going to have to try to prove that the person who accessed the records is actually the person who made the copies, that the person who accessed the records is actually the person who made the copies, that the person who accessed the records is actually the person who made the copies.
And there's our second Freudian slip. The person who made the copies? Oh, interesting. I wonder if that means it would be super, super easy to find out who did this. Seems like you guys started out super sloppy, weren't caring, possibly were excited for the attention and the exclusive, and then got scared when you realized, oh, the internet isn't as dumb as you guys thought we were.
They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police. They would never be the ones to have to give it to the defense. They're not the ones who have to give it to the prosecution. They're not the ones who had to give it to the police.
Since we have obtained the messages between the leaker and 10th woman, we get to infer what their conversations mean. They're pretty straightforward. The leaker says it's going to show up under Renee's name. That's who they were printed under. They're the worst for confidentiality. I'm not worried. Again, I'm not worried. Well, I think you should be worried because there are criminal violations and penalties, as you'll see here, not just HIPAA violations. These are to deter people from doing what this person did. Can I speak to their motive and exactly why they did this? No. Can I call them a freak? Yes. In my opinion, they are a huge weirdo freak. They obtained the personal health information of Alexee for personal gain and with malicious intent. The penalty for that is up to 10 years in jail and up to a $250,000 fine. I will tell you one thing that I have ascertained that New Mexico does enjoy prosecuting: crimes where they get money. So I can tell you with confidence that I believe I've stumbled upon and have all the proof of a crime without inserting myself into Alexee's case whatsoever. A whole separate crime is to be reported because I have all the evidence I have shared online, plus what I have not shared to keep safe as part of the investigation so that trails couldn't be covered up and whatnot, even though if you did try to do that, there might be more consequences in the end for trying to go back and delete and hide everything. I don't know what got into you guys when you did this, specifically speaking to you, 10th woman and the leaker, but you guys seem to have intent behind your actions. That is what the law is all about. Neither one of you, in my opinion, would look very good. Number one, the leaker, who would be facing the criminal punishments, and number two, 10th woman as the key witness in that. It just wouldn't look great for either of you, and as I have proven multiple times, 10th woman will not have press privilege on the stand. It does not fall in line with anything in New Mexico law, and it will not be applied retroactively, since in my investigation I have obtained how she got her press privilege, that she is considered an independent journalist, that she did not have press privilege at the time of releasing these medical records, and only got it afterwards in some sort of attempt to not have to share her source, even though she knew a crime was taking place, which most journalists who understand ethics know they're not supposed to do. So, with all that being said, I do hope that you all have a truly happy Thanksgiving, and this time next week, who knows what the state of New Mexico might know about the release of these medical records. And I hope that that will be the best Christmas present I can give to all of you guys. So, I hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend. Thank you for making it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you're interested in following this case to trial, please subscribe, as I will be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's your girl Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.